So now it's time for a sneak peek really at what I'm planning to do in April. I've just finished filming what I'm going to do in March, but this one, as I say, it's an early look. It's, my first rough idea about what I'm going to be doing in April, and I do recommend you think about it that way if you do any planning, and you just keep on looking at your beds and reassessing how things are doing, and based on what things are succeeding and what things are looking not maybe so healthy, reassess your plans as you go along. Anyway, so let's just sort of dive into this and just do it quickly. So I've got a reserve in here. Oh, better record the screen so you can actually see what I'm talking about. I've got a reserve in here for celery, just in case the ones that I've got behind me don't do so well. I start sowing my carrots in the ground rather than in containers. So this is the first batch in the ground. Keep them moist basically, and you'll get good germination. Sow them about an inch, 1 centimetre deep, and just keep them nice and moist for about 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, and hopefully, they'll germinate really well. Last sowing of the new potatoes. After that, we're all second earlies and main crops. Last sowing, I think, of calabrese for quite a while, because we'll have eaten a lot of calabrese between May and July. Get a bit fed up of it. Takes up a lot of space as well. That is probably better being used for winter crops. New Zealand spinach. I don't actually sow my New Zealand spinach generally. I find it self-seeds from my previous sowings. And so I just sort of prick them out and pot them up and move them into the polytunnel, and they're the ones that I end up sowing. New Zealand spinach is a really nice spinach for summer, because true spinach is rubbish basically in summer, and so is chard. We like rainbow chard, but there's ruby chard and all sorts of different types of chard. Rainbow chard just looks really nice. You put it in the front garden, it's like a flower. And that's a great spinach alternative, and obviously it thrives in summer. I do recommend you do another later succession, because sometimes this early sowing can go to seed, and then you'll have chard through winter. I do an early batch of Cobra French beans to go in big containers in the polytunnel, just because we don't freeze beans, and so we've been without beans for a long time, and so it's really nice to get them early. If you do freeze your beans, of course, then it's not a problem, and it's probably just better to wait for a month. Beetroot, just do a few beetroot, mainly for harvest in September, and then we'll have our main sort of crop that we harvest in October, and that goes all the way through in store until sort of April, May time. Loads of successions of radish, obviously keep doing those. This is my first sowing of turnips as well. I do Tokyo Cross. I think a little bit before, if you do them before this, sometimes they don't go to seed, but quite often they do. So you can be pretty confident that sowing in April won't go to seed. I just had a bad year, I think, once, when loads of them that I did in March went to seed, and so it kind of just put me off. And I don't love them that much that I'm prepared to take the risk. Then I'm doing 2 lots of Estima. One lot is going to go in one of my deep cold frames, and that, because they've got the cold frame lid, it keeps them a little bit warmer and it accelerates the growth. I should get those in sort of late July, and those 10 plants, they'll last us all the way through until September. And then the second one I'll do in some containers, and they're the ones we'll harvest in September onwards, and there'll be lots of buckets of those. Estima, we found, was just a fantastic baking potato, and it did really well in big buckets. And then loads of shallots as well, and again we just leave those in the containers and harvest them all the way through, and we're still harvesting them now. And where we put them, which is next to the wall of the house, they get a little bit of heat from the house in winter, and we'd hardly lost any, even in that really big -10 degree freeze that we had in December. And then just a few onion sets, which I generally start off in modules, so I can plant them out nice and late. And the reason I'm planting them out late is just because I don't have bed space to put them in until I plant them out in sort of early May. And that they'll have also interplanted with a bed of parsnips. So I find onions and parsnips just do really well together. They don't affect the yield of either crop. One being a shallow rooted, one being a really deep rooted. And by the time the parsnips are kind of getting big and the leaves are getting really big, you're harvesting the onions. A few cucamelons, a few more Charlotte potatoes, more salad onions. This actually is the last. Guardsmen are my favourite of all the salad onions, but by the time we get into summer, they just don't do so well. But I found, and it was another recommendation from a YouTube viewer, that Summer Island, they do really nicely in summer. They're not the most amazing salad onion, but they're better than not having any at all. So in April, late April, and then in May, I'm switching over to Summer Island. And then we switch back to Guardsman and White Lisbon and things, and Leela later on in the year. Do my first succession of sweet corn. I do a few successions because they all come together and it's like we're overwhelmed with them. And then I'm starting my main crop, courgettes. So 26th of April I find is pretty good because then I'm planting them out about 26th of May. And by then we're not going to have any frosts, I don't think, after that. And I can obviously protect them with fleece. But I don't think there's no point doing them super early because I will have some that I sowed back in March that are in the polytunnel and have extra protection in the polytunnel. And so they kind of provide the early crop. So these are the main crop, and the main crop ones, it's best to just sow them a little bit later and then not have any risk. It's the same with my winter squashes. So I'm doing Crown Prince and Jack Be Little and Sweet Dumpling and Butternut and Tromboncino. And for some of those I will actually do another sowing in early May, just in case we did get a really late frost or a really bad wind or something like that, and I lost some of them. In fact, often you don't lose them, they just kind of fail to thrive, and it's just better pulling them out and putting a new plant in. So it's just good to have a reserve of the most important ones, and for me that's the Tromboncino and the Crown Prince. And the Tromboncino, which I can't pronounce, is a really great one, I think, to grow because you can use it when it's small. You can use it like a courgette, and then any that you kind of leave to grow on, you can save as a winter squash, and it's good really at any size. So that's the beauty of it really, and it makes it unique, I think, and it just looks really good on climbing frames. And then I'll also do again 26th of April, maybe a little bit earlier, my first succession of dwarf French beans, and I will put those under a low tunnel because they'll probably be planted out in early May, and we will sometimes get a frost up to sort of middle of May. So it's nice to just give those a little protection just for a few weeks. Yeah, more successions of radishes and things, and then come to my tumbler tomatoes that are going to be planted outside. So again, it's kind of like I start them 26th of April, they're kind of ready to plant out about the beginning of June. I don't really like to put tomatoes out before the beginning of June, although I have seen some people have like amazing success with tomatoes planted outside much earlier than that. But it's just the look of the draw for me, because I've got an early batch that I did back in March that are in the polytunnel. There's just no point in taking a risk on tomatoes outside. You know, what's the point when you've already got some in the polytunnel? So then, this is an interesting one, beetroot. So I'm starting my main crop, so my storage crop, beetroot, in April. Now I know some people start them in June. I've got two reasons for doing this. One is that I just want to get them established before it gets too hot, because I find if you get a beetroot established, then it's just going to thrive. But if you're putting it out in July, getting it really well established is much more difficult, given that we probably have no rain at all in July and early August. So that's one reason. The second reason is that they're going in a really, really shady spot. And I've had good success with beetroot in that spot, but only when I start them really early. So yeah, that's what I'm doing, starting them early. And then the nice thing is, of course, if for whatever reason they fail to thrive, you've got time to replace them with something else that you sow in May. And so I will do a few reserves in May just in case, just to fill in any gaps. So that's it, basically. That is my first look at what I'm going to be doing and why I'm going to be doing it in April. My name's Steve. This is the Seaside Kitchen Garden and Allotment channel, and I'll see you soon.